Day advance for up to $425. Call toll-free 877-262-CASH. Title loan amount determined by value of car and ability to repay. Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Good morning and welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on WOOP FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.woopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. Good morning, Debbie Moore. Day after her fifth treatment.
Woo-hoo, one more to go.
She's feeling good today, and that's good news. And I was out last week at a state wrestling tournament. If you're into wrestling, today at Bradley Central High School, the regional tournament to qualify to go to the state individuals is starting today at 10 o'clock, just now started. That'll go on all day, finals at 5 o'clock. So if you like high school wrestling, some of the best teams in the state are right in our district or in our region here. Soddy Daisy, Cleveland, Walker Valley, Bradley are the four top teams. Ooltewah's in that list. There's five. I think there's about 8-9 teams in there. So
we're looking for the individual winners today, aren't we?
That's right. Last week was the state duels championship, which means the team championship, and then this week, next weekend in Franklin, Tennessee, will be the individuals. Now the team can win there, but it's basically about each individual in each the 14 weight classes. So you have to finish first, second, third, or fourth in this regional tournament to go to Franklin.
Yep.
So if you're interested in that,
a lot of representatives from Cleveland and Bradley.
I was over early this morning setting up the for the referees. I take care of their water. I'm their water boy for the referees. But a lot of people mentioned the wrestling match show that we've been doing here on WOOP FM for the last 8 weeks. We did the last one 2 weekends ago, and I'd like to thank everybody for mentioning that they did listen to it and did enjoy it. Deb, tell us what we got going here today. Well, we almost got to go on the air. We were sitting here talking, having a good time, talking about all the about the miners. Yeah,
we're going to talk about Ducktown in just a minute. I want to invite you out tonight to a special activity with our good friend Ray Brannon and his family. They're going to be at the Gum Springs Baptist Church on Gum Springs Road tonight at 6 p.m. and it's the Redback Hymnal Night.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you all know all those old songs out of the Redback Hymnal. So go up there and join Ray and his family. I believe he just celebrated a birthday. And tell him that you heard Ron and Debbie talking about him on Old Town Cleveland. We've been trying to get his family in here to sing on a Saturday morning. We'll have to work on that. Also, we've got a special request. Douglas Brownlow, that now owns the Roth House, needs our help. He needs a picture of the south side of his house, and that's the part that has the white vinyl sunroom on it right now, or whatever kind of room it is.
He needs a picture before the white vinyl sunroom
He does,
is on there.
And I know that there were probably lots of aerial shots made of Magic Chef. I know there's people that had to live in those houses nearby that have pictures of a glimpse of that side of the house. He is trying to restore, I'm going to call the house her, he's going to try to restore her back to her natural beauty. But he wants to put, if there was nothing there, there'll be nothing there. But if there was something there, he wants to make it look like it did in its previous years. So if you have a picture or movies, home movies that might have that in it, if you'll let me know.
That house is 1850s?
He thinks 1830s. And he came in here and told me a world of history. but he won't come on the show and tell us a world of history. So maybe when he gets the house finished, he'll come in and tell us all about her. And he said that, yes, the tunnel stories are true, and he's trying to define that. We have with us our good friend, Ken Rush, from up at the Ducktown Basin Museum, one of our favorite places to go. We're going to talk a little bit about the museum today and the renovations that are being done up there, about what you can see if you go to the museum, a little bit about Copper Hill and its heyday of red hills, and we're going to
talk about some strike they had up there.
They had a big old strike in 1939, and he's going to tell us about this. Ron and I went up and visited the museum, and they actually have films from that time, and he was running the film and telling us the story that went along with it, and I was totally amazed. Excuse me, and I wanted him to come on and talk a little bit about the strike and his beloved museum up there. I keep calling it his museum. How long have you been director up there, Ken? All your life.
A little over 25 years.
Yeah, all your life.
About got it figured out now. Does your car just automatically go there?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, I have driven up there a couple of times that I get passed by this little fast-going car around the river road. And I get there, and his engine's already cool by the time I get there. And I give him a big, long lecture about I don't have time to make new friends, that he needs to take better care of himself. But I'm pretty sure it's just an automatic. You drive from Cleveland every day?
Yes, ma'am.
What part of Cleveland do you live in?
I live in town, middle of town now.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
I moved past year.
Okay, so I didn't think you lived in the middle of town. Do you buy a historic house or just a house?
I'm renting a house.
You're renting a house,
But
I
it's
see.
1948, so it's a nice old house.
Yeah.
Tell everybody where the museum is for those people who don't know, which I hope there are not many, but
I hope not either.
Tell them where it is.
Okay, we are located in Ducktown, just off of Highway 68. But I think most of us coming from Cleveland, we're familiar with driving along the Ocoee on 64. Once you go past the Whitewater Center and actually into Ducktown, you'll come to the junction with Tennessee Highway 68. And if you turn on to 68 North, the museum is on the right, entrance is on the right, just almost immediately after the interchange. It's less than a mile after you get on 68 North. You'll see the museum.
And this is part of the Burra Burra mine?
It is on the Burra Burra mine site. There were several ore bodies in the basin that were commercially mined, but surface headquarters for the mine department was at Burra Burra from 1899 to 1975. And when the Tennessee Cotwell, their successor, City Service, had abandoned that site by the mid-'70s, and in 1982 the property was donated to the museum, and we moved from Main Street, where we originally were operating, up to the Burra Burra site in 82. And then in 1988, the board that I work for excuse me, was able to negotiate with the state of Tennessee to take the property on. So we're a state-owned historic property. We're under the Tennessee Historical Commission, state-owned historic site, and the way the THC sites operate is the state owns the physical property, but they leave administration and operations in the hands of a local nonprofit. So I work for a nonprofit, Ducktown Basin Museum. So we administer the Burra Burra mine site, and the collection, the artifacts belong to the museum. The buildings, the land belong to the state.
That includes like the hoist house.
Yes,
and
we have 10 major structures on 17 acres and 4 associated outbuildings.
And I know last year we were doing some filming around the area up there.
Mm-hmm.
And usually in Ducktown, it's a quiet place. And they were cutting trees. In Ducktown, they were cutting
What's the
trees.
irony of that?
I'm going, why would they be cutting trees? Well, they were clearing out the old softball field. Is that true?
Well, actually, it was originally a baseball field. Part of our property was what originally was the baseball field for the company's, I guess we would consider it like an industrial league team now. They had a Tennessee Copper Company baseball team, and actually they had several that played in different communities, and there was a ball field just below the museum property. And then later it became the ball field for high school and Little League. They had built new baseball fields probably in the late 70s up at the community center, early 80s. I'm not sure the exact year, and our field fell into disuse and immediately reverted back to forest. And we wanted to clear that space, one, to get the historic view shed back, but two, to to actually have a green space that the community could then use. So our goal is not to get it back to play baseball on, but to get an open green field that we can use for events. Or
That'd be
you could
great
go
for
down
tents and things.
That,
if you
that,
ever-
that's you said something very interesting there, that it returns back to forest. Growing up, that was never a problem in Copper Hill
No, it was not.
or Ducktown. There was no forest.
No, it was not.
There was no dirt.
And that's correct.
It was pretty barren, And so the fact is that we go to record, and then what's these chainsaws running, and actually cutting down trees. I'm going, that was just it's ironic that that we've changed from having no dirt to actually having trees and growth in the area. And if many of you who grew up in this area, it was always a thrill to drive through Copper Hill. When I was a young boy in 1960, you drive through there, and it's like you went to the moon or something. And Mars, yeah.
I visited relatives in Buzzard's Roost, I believe. Is that where the Piggly Wiggly is now?
It is.
And while we're mentioning that, we are Deb and I are in our company Old Town Productions is doing a documentary about Copper Hill and Ducktown. It's not about mining as much as the people's lives there, and I think what we found is life went on in a very unique place, no differently than it would in Cleveland, Tennessee, or in Chicago, except you just lived with what you had. And it was interesting to hear how you could let your kids play for miles away because you could see them. there was no tree. As soon as they come up out of the gully, and you could hear for miles too. I mean, the sound really carried up there.
I didn't grow up there. I grew up in West Tennessee, but it had to be the greatest playground ever for a kid.
And they had plenty of little dirt chert rocks, I'd call them, to throw bombs with each other. And but it was their lifestyle, and it's no different. But we talk about that, and
they miss it.
And it was very close.
They miss it just like you would miss your hometown.
It would have been a great for a marketer, and you wanted to test a new product. Copper Hill would have been a perfect place because it was its own community. It was isolated pretty much from the rest of the world. So if you wanted to say, well, what was your favorite product out of this? Well, you had a real good test area. I don't know if they ever used it as a test area or not.
I'm not familiar if they did, but it was pretty insulated from the surrounding areas.
And the people there became very, 2,500 people worked at the mines at one time. Well, and then their families lived there, and I'd say you almost knew everybody in town.
I hear that very, very regularly. At that time, you couldn't get away with anything as a kid because everyone knew your mama.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think my favorite story, one of my favorite stories, recording the folks up there, I believe it was Ron Singleton, is that his name? Was over at the high school. He said that when he was 13 or 14, his dad was transferred to Ducktown from upper East Tennessee, Morristown, I believe. And they came around the river, and he thought, I have moved to Utopia. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. And when they came into Ducktown, his dad was looking for a phone booth so he could go tell somebody that a bomb had been dropped. They moved into the area sight unseen. But he loves it now. He's been there 50 years now.
If people grew up there, and it's the only thing you ever knew. It wasn't. And I think part of our documentary is going to say is that life goes on no matter where you are. You adapt to your surroundings.
That's
and
correct.
These people were making very good money for the times, and company housing and all that. So when this miners' strike came in 39, right? April? Did you tell me? July of 39. This was not just a strike. This was families. This was the community, because the company was the community.
It was the Civil War.
They lived in company houses. What happened till if they went out on strike? Did they get to continue to live in the company houses, or what happened?
Well, first off, everyone did not live in a company house.
Okay.
So a good portion of the workforce did, but they never had as many housing units as you had employees. I've not found anything, and one of our callers may tell me different today. I've not found anything that said they immediately removed people from the housing. And I suspect that would probably, I could be wrong, would probably been in violation of labor laws, because it was not a wildcat strike. They were organized, they were recognized, but there was a drop dead date that the company put forth, and that's my word for it. But it basically said, if you do not return to work by this date,
you're terminated.
You're terminated, and a lot of people did not return and were, forced out of their home if they lived in a company home.
But now,
And were in effect blackballed from ever working for the company again.
oh really?
Wow.
Well, now the strike, did that involve all the mines or just one mine? How many different mines, and who owned? Was it all one big company? Tell us the structure of all the different mines up there.
Well, early in the 20th century, the mines had closed in the end of the 19th century because of lack of transportation, basically, and there was no way to get fuel in and no way to get materials out except for wagon. So in 1890, when the old line was completed, what we call today the old line, it would have been brand new in 1890, into the basin, the mines began to reopen. And by the early part of the 20th century, you had 3 companies operating in the basin. One of those went out very shortly in the 20th century, and by 1936, Tennessee Copper had bought their rival out, Ducktown Sulfur, Copper and Iron, that later reorganized to Ducktown Chemical and Iron. So from 36 forward, you're under one company's ownership.
Now, how many different mines were there? Isabella and
There's 9 different ore bodies that were commercially mined. Now, by the 30s, London and East Tennessee are considered mined out, so they're no longer mining. But all of these ore bodies are very close together. They're between Ducktown and Copper Hill, and if you're familiar with the basin, that's roughly 3 miles. So you could draw a rectangle 2 by 3 miles and get all the ore deposits within Tennessee's Polk County within that section. But because of the times, not everyone owned an automobile. There was still a lot of, foot traffic. So you had these little communities that basically, if you worked in one of the, not always, but if you worked in, say, Burra Burra, you probably lived in Ducktown. If you worked at Isabella, you probably lived in Isabella, these mines. But not everyone. There were some cars, and there were men that still walked to work at that time, and men still rode a horse to work at that time. But the communities, one of the things that was interesting to me coming in, of course, I'm from a different generation, is even though they're 3 miles apart, people in Ducktown rarely went to Copper Hill, and people in Copper Hill rarely went to Ducktown because each community had their own stores and automobile mechanics, and all of these things are located within each community. So there wasn't a lot of travel. It's not like today when we think nothing of jumping in the car and driving 2 hours to Atlanta because we want to pick something up.
Was there some natural rivalry between the mines and the workers?
I don't think so much rivalry between the mines or the workers. Now, historically you've had rivalry in Polk County, what they term above and below the mountain.
That's East and West Polk County.
Right, that's East and
for
West.
us politically correct
Right.
people.
But in the research I was trying to do this week for coming on this program, there was more of a merchant class, more of a professional class in Copper Hill. So there probably was a little bit of rivalry between that and the communities of Isabella and Ducktown, simply because Copper Hill and McKaysville, their twin city across the line in Georgia, were just very much, they were larger. They were on the main line of the railroad. Copper Hill, the L&N line came through town. Isabella and Ducktown were only served by the company line, so you didn't get to jump on the company line and ride the train. You had to go to Copper Hill to catch the train if you were going to go to Knoxville or go to Atlanta.
Was there a lot of outside people? I mean, McKaysville, I count that part, but was there people from Cleveland and Athens come work in the mines, or was it more predominantly more people just lived there?
At that time, I think it was more the people that lived there. It's not until you get it right. Travel's too hard. It's not until you get in the 60s and 70s, and the roads are better, and everyone owns a car, that you start to see people living as far away as Cleveland or going into Chattanooga or going to Murphy and points beyond that are working for the company. In the 30s, you pretty much live there.
Okay, now this might be a dumb question because everybody thinks that why did they strike? What was their asking point? Was it wages, safety, time off, insurance?
So
what
1939, we were still just coming out of the Depression, sort of, kind of, maybe?
Actually, probably still within the Depression.
Well, within the Depression then.
It sort of, just to give you a little more background, there were unions in the basin during the First World War. They pretty much withered on the vine in the 20s. The economy was booming. We were in that post-World War I boom period in the national economy.
You said company had done better on
company
safety and
company had done better. They had implemented some new programs. So the unions had folded up by 21. They began to reorganize in 33 because now we're in the Depression. Times are tougher, and at that time the unions that formed in 33, and you had one in each community, one in Copper Hill, one in Ducktown, one in Isabella, and they were under the Mine and Mill Workers Union, which was under the American Federation of Labor, or AFL. That group itself began to splinter in the mid-30s, and out of that came what was called the CIO, the Congress for Industrial Organization, or committee. I think I just got that wrong. And the Ducktown and Isabella unions went with CIO, where Copper Hill stayed with AFL. AFL, I guess we would say, was more of a conservative approach, and they believed in only trades being within the union, and managers could be within the union if they worked within that trade. CIO was more of the opinion that any worker was eligible for union membership, but people in a management position were not. And so it sort of was almost a three-legged fight by the time you get to 39.
Now, what was the state law concerning open or closed work?
Well, I'm not sure of Tennessee law, but in 1935, the Wagner Act passed at the federal level, which allowed a closed shop. And from that, you began to see push for that locally. And in the meantime, two other unions had sprung up. So by the time you get to I think it's 37. Yeah, you've got 5 different unions representing the men. So the National Labor Relations Board came in and said, we need to get one union to represent all employees, because the company was in an impossible situation of trying to negotiate with 5 unions. So they called elections in March of 38. AFL won by a narrow margin. But CIO protested that the management with Tennessee Copper had in effect colluded and had allowed manipulation and intimidation to affect the vote. After a hearing and a review, the National Labor Relations Board agreed, overturned the results, and you had a second election in November of 38. And it took about 3 months to certify, but now CIO won. And, to be just perfectly honest, that was not the management's choice. They would much rather have dealt with AFL. They considered them more pragmatic and were willing to allow managers to serve, which would have given the company at least some leverage within the organization. But when they went out on strike in July of 39.
How many employees went on? How many employees were there, do you think, on that fateful day in 1939?
Well, at the election in November, there were almost 1,200 eligible voters for the union election, and that would have not included, people in a management position. So, you probably had 1,500 employees, more or less, at that time.
Had the mines become more dangerous in the 20s?
Well,
I
I don't know that they were more dangerous, but things had changed. You had gone into mechanization. In the 20s, still a lot of the work was done by hand, which in itself can be very dangerous. But, machinery brings a new level of risk. You went from hand loading in the 20s to using power shovels. You went from using mules for haulage underground to using electric locomotives. And with electricity comes a new risk of electrocution. So there were some areas, the company, Tennessee Copper, had really begun to push worker safety in the 30s. But when they went out, the main reasons that they cited were working conditions, which safety would be part of. They also, Tennessee Copper had not awarded the back pay that was due during that stretch period from the time of the election and the certification. They were also not collecting dues out of the checks, which they were required to as part of that victory. And the men were also concerned about a guaranteed schedule. You were not always guaranteed a 40-hour week. And there was a lot of abuse of the 8-hour day at that time too. That they had begun in the teens in the basin of paying overtime if you worked more than 8 hours. But as is the case, there's always pressures. Hey, stay another hour. You can put it on next day's check or whatever. So those were the main issues as the union saw it. But the reality was, when they won the election, CIO, they won with a majority, but it was not an overwhelming majority. So there were several hundred men who had voted in the election for AFL, and they did not feel like the strike was the right answer. So again, it was almost a three-legged fight. Both unions were still active in the basin trying to recruit members. Both unions were bringing in monies to support the families who weren't getting a paycheck at that time. So it really was a very complex situation.
I guess at the company store you didn't have credit if you didn't have a check. Wow.
Yeah.
What
So
about
So you couldn't grow your own groceries either.
who owned Tennessee Copper at that time?
it was owned by the Lewison family
Okay,
out
now
of New York.
you see reading history and looking at documentaries. You go up into West Virginia coal mines. You go to Carnegie Steel, and when Frick was running
Carnegie.
Carnegie, yes, you got to say it right, Carnegie Steel. They hired Pinkertons and other guards to come in who busted heads. Was that true of the copper strike?
Yes, the company did hire some professional work guards to come in, and then they also worked a deal with the sheriff of the county at that time, Biggs, for him to organize a guard force, and he hired a lot of private citizens to serve as guards as well. But part of that home movie that we have from '39 shows the guards on the street, and about every 15 or 20th one has got a uniform on, and the rest of them have overalls or their work clothes.
Now,
and, you see a lot of long guns over their shoulders, shotguns, and then you see the guards.
Was there any confrontations? I mean,
there were
large scale or just individual, small groups?
Not large scale open battle, but there were several incidents of fights, and there were some shootings. There were some burnings. There were some dynamitings. So it was a violent time.
Anybody die through all
There
this?
were a few.
That's sad. That's over labor. That's interesting that they die for. Of course, I'm sure those men who were out on strike were convinced that they were absolutely right, and the company convinced they were absolutely right. And I won't get into who's right or wrong because I wasn't there those days. But it's interesting that did they? What group did they hire? Outside group? Do you remember what it was?
I'm not familiar with the firm. It wasn't Pinkerton.
Okay.
It wasn't a national
The thing
firm.
about that is you have to wonder, I mean, were they just trying to clear the streets off, or what?
There was some, in my opinion, there was some intimidation as well.
Sure, there had to be.
There was they in that video again, they show a force. They march up the street with their guns, and that's. I mean, I'm sorry. What can it be other than intimidation?
Intimidation. Yes, I remember that. On
they
the
don't have
video.
to patrol the streets. That's not their job. But
Now,
yet
at
they're
that
marching
time,
down them.
Wow, that just amazes me. And
Now, did they set up pickets at the
Yes,
at the gates?
There were pickets set up at the gates to all the facilities. And when they went out on strike, the manager of the company, Mr. Hauser, was actually in California at the time. So his assistant manager responded by shuttering the facility. So when the men walked, they shut it down. The company did in response. Now, they were still allowing workers to cross initially to, care for machinery and keep things maintained. But as the weeks wore on, that became more and more confrontational as well, because they were not wanting people to cross. And again, you had a lot of men who did not vote for CIO, and they began to cross as well. So you had a lot of this going on.
So those guys, commonly known as scabs at
Scabs.
that point in time,
Still to this day.
that their lives started not just now we're being threatened by the coworkers, because now these become very heated situations. I mean, Cleveland, Tennessee is not as familiar with this, although we've had strikes, and the Magic Shelf was a big one here, and with some tense moments, some bombings what took place in that. So it is a very personal type thing, and I call it I guess a crowd mentality, or when this group gets together and everybody plays off each other, and before it becomes a pack of dogs and they're all ready to kill. So I understand that. Ain't know whether it's right or wrong, but
I
so
think
now,
you were saying that some of the older folks that have talked to you about the strike said that when they were children during the strike, they weren't allowed to play with their friends if the friend's family
Right.
was on this, which happened here
Right.
during the Magic Shelf strike too. I remember on the playground at Oak Grove. Let me ask you this. Going back to the working conditions, were they still getting the lung disease at that time? What's that called?
It's silicosis in hard rock mining, and yes, that would still be very prevalent at that time. It was recognized probably early in the 20th century that it was occurring, maybe earlier. We have accounts from the first decade of the 20th century where they're beginning to implement practices to try to limit the amount of dust. It's from breathing the silica or the rock dust that's generated in the mines. But, it's not until the 1970s with the OSHA and the other federal laws that wearing respirators and masks become mandatory. So, they're they are wet drilling by the teens to try to combat the dust, but no one's wearing a mask. So, yes, that was part of it. But a lot of it,
just
too,
liquefied dust then.
Well,
Force down.
but we think about that, and I don't mean to make light of that, but industrial diseases don't get you on the job generally.
It's years later.
It's years later. A lot of the issues that were coming up in the 30s were day-to-day safety issues about being put in unsafe conditions or having to work with maybe machinery that had not been properly
You're way
maintained.
down in the
or you hadn't
ground.
been
That's
properly
dangerous.
trained. Yes.
I know
Folks,
my
we're talking
relative-
to Ken Rush here about
Sorry.
the 1939 copper mine strikes and the Copper Basin area and the Ducktown area and Isabella and all that northern part of our above the mountain in
Eastern
Polk
part.
County. And we're going to open up the phones here at 614-5553. Give us a call if you got a question or a comment.
I think my relative Gudger Smith was killed in the mines up there, maybe in the 40s.
I know he was killed in the mines. We've talked about it, but I think that's when it was. Yeah.
Go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron and Deb. How you doing?
Hey, Bullet.
Hey, Bullet.
You was talking about the Magic Shelf Strike. I worked there when that was going on, and they had one in 78, then they tried to get another one, I think, after that, but I was actually working over there. They withheld my vote. I don't know why. And, but I know there's a lot of people lost their marriages and homes on account of that.
Yep.
I know if you
It was
pick
not
up. I
pleasant.
know if you guys lost a pickup truck too. I know one blown up down in the parking lot, and then when I worked with the sheriff's department at that time, I was on the protection side of the strike, and I had to go out to where they had a bomb under a truck, and I sort of went and got everybody back. So get on the other side of me, and you'll be extremely safe. But it was pretty dangerous.
Smart though, Ron. I actually left my car at home and walked.
That would probably have been a smart thing to do.
And but anyway, it was a. I'm kind of skeptic, but I think Magic Shelf's been all right without a strike, a union all these years, and but I don't know why they withheld my vote over there for. I never have understood that.
Who knows?
Yeah, right. Who knows? Anyway, I'll let you guys go. It's good talking.
Thank you.
Thank you there.
Is there anything left at Isabella?
As far as the company operations or their facilities, very little. In the last 10, 12 years, Glen Springs Holdings has been doing remediation work on those properties as part of the agreement they have with the state and EPA. And a lot of the buildings at Isabella were just not structurally safe any longer, so they've been demolished.
Yeah.
And actually, the road has been moved. You can't even drive through that complex any longer. It's all gated.
My grandmother was born there in 1910.
Hey, go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Ron, Debbie,
Hey.
your guest. Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Debbie, I'm glad you're feeling better today.
I'm pretty sassy this morning.
Well, that's natural for you. Anyway, I just wanted to make a comment there. My wife's from over there in Hales Holler. She was born and raised in Hales Holler, and all of my outlaws that lived up there, they lived down on Fighting Town Creek down there.
Love the names up there.
But my dad-in-law worked for Tennessee Copper Company as a painter for 35 years, I guess.
And what was his name?
Hugh Barnes.
Hugh Barnes. Okay.
Yeah, and he finally retired up there I guess in the early 70s, because I married my wife in 69, and but his whole family, you know, and I've been in the company store there across from going into town there on the right-hand side of Copper Hill, and we've made bluegrass music over there in the Hoist House.
The Hoist House now. Oh, wait till you see the Hoist House now. They put a nice big shiny concrete floor in it, and you can walk without having to worry about stepping in holes or hitting humps.
Well, that's good. But anyway, I'm listening to the show and enjoying it, and I've spent a lot of time in Copper Hill and over at Ducktown, but that brings back a lot of...
Now, your dad wouldn't happen to have any old movies, would he? Of anything at Copper Hill?
Your father-in-law's family.
Father-in-law?
No, but there's... if I can get my wife to get those pictures, there's just tons of pictures. He's got tons of pictures that was taken up there.
Well, bring those to me, and I'll scan them, or I'll get Ken to scan them. He can do them a little bit better than me. We'll take good care of them. What we're looking for, you know, if you got mining pictures, that's fine, but really we're looking for that everyday life of them standing out in the front yard with, you know, a cap and gown on, but you can see that there's no trees, you know, that kind of stuff.
Well, let me ask him one quick question, and then I'll get off of here. The red purple dirt that is being trucked out from up there,
Yeah, we'll tell that story.
and sold to Japan or China
Right.
or whatever.
China.
What are they reclaiming out of that dirt?
Go ahead, Ken. Tell them. Let's start it. Bob, I'm going to go ahead and hang up, and we'll let him explain the whole thing for folks that don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Thank you, dear.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Okay, the product that they've been selling for the last several years, and it is a reddish purple color.
You can tell by looking at the tires on the dump trucks.
But it's not actually soil or dirt. It's a product they produced. It's called iron sinter. And the ore, even though we talk a lot about copper, the ore has a lot of iron sulfide in it as well. And they would separate that material from the copper-bearing mineral, and where the copper was pretty high grade and they would actually refine it and produce metallic copper, the iron was considered low grade, but they wanted to heat it enough to burn the sulfur off to capture that to make sulfuric acid from, and they were left with this product called sinter. And it's actually calcine, iron calcine. I got off on center for some reason. It's iron calcine, and it's an iron oxide. And they began making that in the 20s and historically sold it to Birmingham, and they would mix it with other sources of iron and make steel from it. And it's a very fine powder, so when they were shipping it to Birmingham, what they would do with it was sinter it. They would put it in another facility that caused it to sort of clump and fuse together so it was easier to ship. And when you put it in the blast furnace, all of it didn't go flying up the chimney because it was so fine. And they sold calcine in the form of sinter to the steel mills in Alabama through the 1960s. But by the end of the 60s, the markets in Alabama were either closing or began to buy a better product coming from another part of the United States that was higher grade. So the local companies lost the market, but they were still producing it because they wanted the sulfur. So in the 70s and 80s, they stockpiled some 10 million tons of iron calcine on the surface. They called it Calcine Mountain. They piled it up. They put loose soil on top of it so the wind didn't blow it away. It sowed grass on it, and it sat there for the next 20 years. By the early part of the 2000s, you began to get interest in it again because of the market demand in China. So for the last 10 years or so, they have been selling calcine to China, but it is commodities companies in North America that buy it here, and they ship it overseas, and then China buys it on delivery. And for a long time, they were trucking it up the Ocoee up 64 and putting it on barges and moving it down the Tennessee to the Tennessee-Tom Bigby Canal to Mobile Bay. For the last, I guess, 8 months, it's all been going out by rail. So you don't see the trucks any longer on 64. But if you've been to Copper Hill, you might notice there's a lot of hopper cars sitting in the rail yard there across from the old plant site, and that's for hauling calcine. And it's not an everyday thing, and it's not even an every week thing. There's a lot of moving parts in getting it overseas, and a big part of it is you have to have a boat or a ship ready to haul it. And you begin paying when the boat docks, so there'll be a train leave Copper Hill before the boat ever gets to Mobile, because the idea is you want the train to arrive as soon as the boat arrives, so you get it loaded and turned around. But it's a product. It's, a lot of people have thought they were shipping waste.
So they're making pig iron out of it?
They're blending it with other sources of iron and producing steel. Whether it's coming back as the frames around our TV sets or these awesome sockets you can buy for $5 that break, I'm not sure. But.
For a long time, you folks will remember seeing multitudes of dump trucks coming down the river road, and they were going down to Moccasin Bend and dumping the stuff there on barges, and it was leaving from there. And
So
I
how
was
much
there one day, and you could see where the trucks turned in and out. There was purple stuff on the ground.
How much has been shipped now? Do you have any idea?
Estimates I've been told is they've moved roughly half of it, so maybe 4 to 5 million tons.
So how many more years of stuff do they have?
Well, it will depend on the market demand.
Yeah, we just call it a byproduct.
Right.
Very interesting.
I got a follow-up question here in a minute. Go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, good morning. This is RD.
Hey, RD.
Hey, RD.
Got a question to ask. After the Civil War, I think it was General Wilder, maybe Colonel, I had the rank wrong, settled in Chattanooga and was instrumental in finding a lot of the mineral deposits around the valley. I think he actually discovered a lot of minerals around the Rockwood area, and the town was named for a friend of his, if not mistaken. But did Wilder have anything to do with originally finding the copper deposits in Copper Hill, or was that known before he got here, or did he have any hand in that part of the original discovery, or was that place in operation before he got into the minerals and the mining around here?
It actually was in operation well before that time. Copper was... It was noted in 1837 when they were getting ready to, or not copper, but minerals, when they were getting ready for the Cherokee removal. The state of Tennessee had sent a geologist through, I guess doing what we'd call a windshield survey today. He did a horseback survey, and he noted several outcroppings of iron, which is that iron sulfide or pyrite I was mentioning earlier. After removal, you had prospectors all through the mountains looking for gold. And in 1843, a gentleman named Lemons discovered what he originally thought was gold. Of course, he was seeing the copper pyrites and the iron pyrites. Very quickly realized it was copper and wasn't interested in copper, and he moved on. But others followed up where he had found the discovery and sent them off for assay. And as we say, the boom was on. So it took about 7 years to get the infrastructure in because the area was so remote. But copper was discovered in 43, and the first mine opened in 1850.
Okay. Well, another thing, I'm a firearms collector.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the labor unrest, the guards and everything being armed. A lot of the registered transferable Thompson submachine guns that are on the market right now were originally sold to mining companies, manufacturing guard units, and local police departments specifically to put down labor unrest. That's why you see a lot of those in the old pictures.
Wow. There actually was someone in Copper Hill that made firearms, wasn't there?
Yeah, now that's more recent. That's recent. But there were. You're exactly correct. We recently obtained some files from the attorney that represented the company during that time, and they are ledgers and accounting books that show them purchasing machine guns and handguns to arm the guards. And in addition to the Thompsons, they bought a lot of little nickel-plated .32 revolvers that they would give the men if they didn't have a personal weapon they wanted to use. And locals tend to call them strike guns, and you see them pop up from time to time at some of these auctions. They're a step above a Saturday night special, but I've held one in my hand. They're not a lot.
Hey, RD, I know we made a date last week when my husband wasn't here, but I understand that the E.L. Ross Farm, the log buildings have all been disassembled and moved.
Okay, well, let me see.
You need to drive by there and see. And his house was burned a couple of years ago, 18 months to two years ago, and fortunately the buildings were removed, but I don't know where they went. So maybe you can find that out.
Let me talk to my coworker, because I know right in front of his house there's a house that sits right there. And
Okay.
maybe it's a different house, but it's all post and beam. I'll talk to him. He's been kind of in and out vacation thing.
Okay, well, just let me know. Whatever it is, I want to see it.
It's by the old spring, by the spring that's like got a brick wall and kind of little pond now type of thing.
Mm-hmm. And RD, if you will ask him too, if he happens to know the location of where Candy's Creek Mission was.
He moved here. I'm thinking about 98. So
okay, well, I've got somebody that's asking their great grandpa or grandpa today, so maybe we'll find that location before it slips out of everybody's memory.
It'd be cool to organize a search and a dig.
Yeah.
A true archaeological dig to find that. It isn't. But I will check with him this week.
Thank you, dear.
Okay, bye.
Bye. RD and I made a date last week when you weren't here.
Yeah, up on the screen now, if you're on the internet, you'll see a picture of some guys sitting at a store, and it says, Skaggs, we are watching.
No, we watched the scabs go by.
Yeah. And that's actually in front of the old Ducktown Courthouse.
Oh, is it? All right. Good morning, live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yes, sir. You're talking about Copper Hill.
Yes. Who are we talking to?
My name is William L. Nolan. I grew up in Copper Hill, and I went to Copper Basin High School, and I grew up there.
Well, good. And how old are you?
69.
69, okay.
The gentleman from the museum was talking about a strike in 1939. Of course, I don't remember that, but my grandfather probably would have. But there was another smaller strike in the late 60s. But, and for a lot of us that grew up under the desert type, when I go back there, it doesn't seem like the same place I grew up in.
It has changed, hasn't it?
Yes, sir, it has.
Yeah. I know Ken has talked about that, how was it, 5 layers of earth had disappeared?
Well, at least 5 feet of soil.
Yeah, that's quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, considering if you dig here in Cleveland, there are only about 4 inches of topsoil anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get down below that, and we don't have really deep topsoil unless you go up along the river.
Mr. Mullins, what community did you grow up in?
I grew up in one of the company houses. It was called Newtown.
Mm-hmm.
Newtown.
In the Copper Hill area.
Mm-hmm.
And,
So do you remember shopping at the company store?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, they had one in Isabella, and they had one in Copper Hill. I mean, they had one in Copper Hill. It burnt down. The one in town was right in Copper Hill where the post office is now. And then they moved it out on 64 there. It's just a little ways out of town. See, I worked at the company there for 10 years, from 1965 to 1975, but I worked in the Copper Hill area. Worked over at Isabella one time.
What kind of work did you do, Mr. Mullins?
Well, it's Nolan, and
Nolan.
I'm sorry.
That's fine, ma'am. I started in everybody started in the labor part. Then I transferred into the roasters. That's where you burnt the ore to send to the acid plant to make sulfuric acid, oleum, which was the oleum was sent down to Tyner to dry gunpowder. But then I worked in the acid department later on.
I imagine the roaster might have been a hot job.
Huh?
I imagine the roaster would have been a hot job.
Well, it was I tell people they were backwards. We would be, when I was in the labor department, one October, and it was pretty cold. We went and dug a spring up in the community. And then in the summertime, they would shut down one of the roasters. They'd have to clean them out ever so often, but they did that hot job in the sun. So it was a nice place to grow up. I tell you what, I wouldn't, going back, I wouldn't take anything, but when I left there, I started working in the medical field. But I wouldn't, like I say, when I go back up to visit now, it's not the same place.
Did you, as a young man, go to like I believe it was the YMCA, to all their activities, the YMCA building in Copper Hill?
Yes, they had. What they had was Saturday night, what they called, all the teenagers met there. It's what we call a canteen.
Yes.
That happened on, Saturday night. But it was an experience. But I grew up in Newtown, which is part of the company houses, and you could see the plant from where I grew up. I worked there 10 years. It was a nice place to grow up.
All I could think of was when everybody that we talked to describes the land, I thought, well, they didn't have Easter egg hunts there.
Well, if you painted them brown, you'd never find them.
Right.
They'd be dirt.
Well, if you grew up there when it was bare, and you go back now, it don't look like the same place.
No, I visited there quite often, and it's I miss it too. But
yeah, like my children are 30 and 23, and they never really seen it that way.
They look at us like we're crazy when we tell them about it.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you so much for calling.
Wait, one more.
Okay, go ahead. Just talk as long as you want.
No, I'm not going to talk long because it took me forever to get in.
Yeah. Our phone gets a little busy on Saturday morning. Go ahead.
You was talking about the pictures. Now, there is probably, I know there's a lot of people lives around Cleveland, and I might look around and see what I can come up some. You were wanting more of a family type.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Picnics or, I don't care if they're at how everybody always had their picture made in the graveyards. Anything that will show those red hills, we would love to have it when talking about family life.
Even black and white pictures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Movies.
And movies. Any old 8mm movies would be, because people really like to see those in our documentaries.
If it's just kids playing in their yard, that's okay.
Yeah.
So you hunt for us and let us know. You know where to find us.
I can see where if I can find some, I'll be more than happy to. And thanks. It's good to talk to y'all.
Bye-bye,
Thank
dear.
you, sir.
Thank you.
I love our callers.
You can call us here at 614-5553. We've got Ken Rush from the Ducktown Basin Museum. I want to get that wrong.
I know.
Ducktown Basin Museum.
There you go.
Well,
And
we got another caller.
another call. Go ahead, call. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, love the show every week. Specifically love the show. Just wanted to say real quick, I have 9, 10 aunts and uncles from Copper Hill and Ducktown, and spent my summers up there. But Ken does a phenomenal job. I'm sure you don't remember me, but my family and I have been through there many times, and wow, what a great, couldn't ask for a better ran program than what they do up there. Very impressive.
It is.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let me say real quick, my grandfather worked in the mine, and he died back in 91, but he had a big poster in the basement of his checks from the mine, and I was just blown away. He had 6 kids and 50-hour work weeks where, you couldn't buy a hamburger at McDonald's now.
That's absolutely true. There's lots of good stories that are going to be in this documentary about, at the end of the week, when people got paid, there was no money left in their check. They had spent it all at the company store. They get a check for 5 cents.
Yeah, I've seen those, and I will say some of the best whippings I ever received in my life. I spent summers up there, and a lot of times we drive up on Sunday. I grew up in Dalton, and get my Sunday clothes messed up in that red dirt.
Yeah.
Let me say this, I get off the phone, but man, great job, guys, and Debbie and Ron. I find you on Facebook, is that correct?
Yes.
You can go to Old Town Cleveland. We have one there. And we also have one, Friends of Old Town Cleveland, if you want to join, because Old Town Cleveland has 5,000 friends, and you can only have 5,000 on Facebook. So go to Friends of Old Town Cleveland. And, of course, Ron Moore is my personal one, and Debbie Moore has one also.
Yes.
Okay, and then I'll just get with you guys when I talk about this all on air. But I'm meeting with my mom tonight. We're having a birthday party in Dalton, and she's already got all these pictures together. But my family owned back in the 50s and 60s a gas station in Copper Hill, a grocery store, a knitting place, and I've got pictures of some of that stuff. Like I want, maybe I can get with you and we can see about.
Right. And
If you'll get with me, Ken lit up like a Christmas tree when he heard that. The museum would love those too. If you can bring those in on a Saturday morning, we'll scan them and have them ready for you to pick up the next Saturday.
That sounds great. I'll just see you this coming. Y'all always start at 10 o'clock, right?
We start at 10 o'clock, so be here a few minutes before 10. We're usually here about 9:15 or 9:20.
We'll just do that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, dear. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you.
Pictures. Yeah, we were both excited about that. We're going to go to break here in just a few minutes. I can't believe the first hour has already passed.
It always goes so fast.
Some of my favorite stories, too, interviewing the folks, are talking about the cars that everybody drove to work. Talk about that a little bit, Ken.
Well, I'm guessing they were talking about how hard it was to keep a car because of the environment.
Yeah, that's it. And the uglier the car, the better price you could get for it.
Right.
Because they didn't care then. But,
right.
But it was an ugly car town.
Right. Well, there's a lot of SO2 in the air and a pretty corrosive environment. Mm-hmm. So finish on a car didn't last any time, and then you began to lose your fenders and your quarter panels.
And so the uglier the better.
We heard one story where the family said that there was a whistle or a horn blown, and you'd run and get your house plants and take them backside because there was a blue or purple cloud coming.
Yeah, on occasion they would be what they would call a release. Gas would get away, and they would sound a siren. And, SO2, a lot of plants cannot stand even the slightest elevation of sulfur dioxide. So, yeah, you'd scramble to get your plants in.
And your kids and your dogs. And
yeah, well, maybe that. But, no, I'm teasing. Everybody get inside. Get your clothes off the line as well. It played havoc on clothes, especially nylon stockings.
Yeah, I know Jimmy Helton's daughter told me their dad used to come home and he had that smell and he was purple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yep, Ron, I reckon I played everywhere in Tennessee and Georgia and Kentucky and all around, everywhere but Saipan, Cuba. Music,
Uh-huh.
I played up there in Copper Hill, too, bluegrass, and then, of course, we played over in Fannin County back when we was rock and roll, and you know who this is, don't you?
No, I have no idea.
Oh, look at my number there, buddy. Anyway,
I think it might be Sid. I'm not sure.
Anyway, I had a question or two for that guy. Did he, I forgot his name there.
Ken.
Let's show, well, all the way through. But does he know any Pickleshimers up there?
I do. I do know some Pickleshimers.
Yeah. Okay.
That's not a real common name in areas. I know some Pickleshimers myself.
Well, anyway, Randy, he's over quality control at Plant 5 for Jackson Catnapper. He's a good friend of mine, and he's from Copper Hill. He's told me quite a bit about it. Of course, I've been up there. I've been through there several times. I'd go to Copper Hill to go to the aquarium place in Blue Ridge, Georgia. And I wanted to know, first of all, what is that river you cross, or is it a creek? Or
Potato Creek. Is it Potato Creek?
Well,
what road is it on? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, you go when you go in, like when you're going into Copper Hill, you actually, it seemed like you made a right, then you crossed a pretty good sized bridge.
It's the Ocoee in Tennessee, but it's called the Toccoa River in Georgia. So when you're on that concrete bridge, you're actually crossing the Toccoa River because the name changes at the state line.
So that's the state line right in there.
Yeah, yep. When you go across that bridge, you start out in Tennessee.
If you're wet, you're in Georgia.
When you stop at that three-way stop, you're still in Tennessee, but when you turn right, you're in Georgia.
Yeah. I remember all the little businesses that are through Copper Hill and all authentic, I don't know how to say that, authentic looking and nice looking places. Last time I had went up to Florence Heights, I think his name was, up in Blue Ridge there, But I'd go through that way because it was such pretty to drive through there. And this has been quite a few years ago. But I just wonder if you know, but I mean, the name of that river was what now?
It's Toccoa in Georgia, but we call it the Ocoee in Tennessee.
It's the same river. Ocoee River or the Toccoa is the same one. It just
has a different name.
Yeah.
Okay, who was that? Who was that guy calling in earlier? Said he had played bluegrass music up there.
That was Bob Gill.
Bob Gill.
Who was that?
Bob Gill.
Oh, Bob Gill. Does he play bluegrass music, Ron?
Oh yeah, he does.
What, is he with a band?
We don't know.
I don't know. I don't think he does anymore. I think he's been around that long time. Hey, we got to go to break here. It's after 11 o'clock.
Give him my number there. Hey, you know I wouldn't miss y'all for nothing.
Okay.
I know that.
All righty, thanks.
Y'all got the most interesting show on the radio.
I don't know. It's different. How's that? We'll see you later, Sid.
Bye-bye, Sid.
Hey, we're going to go to break. We'll be back here in just a few minutes on Old
play,
Town Cleveland. We'll play Gone Home for all those friends and family members who've gone on. This is out for your family.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into Cash.
The cash you need is closer than you think.
Get an auto title loan today for up to $2,500 at Check Into Cash.
You drive home with the cash in your pocket.
Visit Check Into Cash for an auto title loan today, or get a payday advance for up to $425. Call toll-free 877-262-CASH. Title loan amount determined by value of car and ability to repay. Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it, dig it. Dig it, dig it.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
All of my friends that I loved yesterday have gone. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. The songbirds are singing, the dells seem to say have gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. Life here is lonely since they've gone before. Gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. The old weeping willow that stands by the door sadly sighs. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone
Welcome back to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. We have a caller. Good morning, caller. How you doing? Are you there? Did I lose you? Are you still there? Hello? I hope Steve was his name. I hope you call back, Steve. I lost you somehow there trying to get you on the air. It's too many buttons.
Push them all. Push them all.
Yeah. Steve, please call back there. We're sorry we missed you there. We lost you. We got Ken Rush in here today. He's the director of the Ducktown Basin Museum.
Correct.
Got it
Good
all in
job.
one sentence
Good
that
job,
time.
Ron.
And tell us where it is again so everybody will know. Let me get this line here real quick before we do that. Good morning, live on Old Town Cleveland.
My name is Frank Clowry. I taught school at Copper Basin High School in the early 70s.
Yes, sir.
And you were talking about the pollution. I remember I had a PE class the first period of the day, and it was so foggy with the pollution, and sometimes we couldn't even go outside because the sulfur in the air was so strong. And I can remember driving up there at 12 o'clock and having to use your headlights. It was so foggy because of the and I guess that was when the company was really operating, because they were making acid and sending it to the TNT plant in Chattanooga to make stuff for the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And I never will forget that. And also during that time period, the high school there had about 400 kids, and when the company shut down, now they're down to probably less than 200 kids in the high school. No jobs there. A lot of people had to move, but back then it was a thriving community, and at that time they were the biggest taxpayer in Polk County. And I never will forget, I'd read that they paid in the early 70s, of course, they sent $1 million worth of taxes down below the mountain. I graduated from Polk County High School, and and y'all mentioned the above the mountain and below the mountain split. It involved everything from politics to sports to just about everything, and that's been kind of a hindrance to Polk County. I hope we're over that, but
no.
I hope we're over it.
I think there's some of it, but there's still some of that mentality there.
Yes, and there is, and I know they had thought it best that even the high school football game be discontinued because it got such a heated rivalry, and we don't play them anymore in football. It got too heated. So, but I never.
But they were big money makers at the gate.
Oh yes, sir. Yes, sir. They financed the program.
That's right.
But I enjoyed my 2 years there. I coached basketball there at the high school. I really enjoyed it and really didn't want to leave, but I ended up leaving after 2 years and really, really enjoyed it. And I can remember my dad and telling that they drove cattle. My grandfather was a successful farmer there in Ocoee, and he they used to drive cattle up the Ocoee River, up the old Copper Road, up there for pasture in the summertime. And they would stop up there at somewhere and spend the night, and then continue the trip the next day on up to Ducktown, or up there and right around, I guess, Isabella, right in there before you got into where they wasn't any grass. It had all been killed. But and I know y'all probably mentioned this. They said that area was recognizable by the astronauts in space because of the red hills there, where all the vegetation had been killed by all of the what y'all call SO2.
Yes, sir.
You could Ken actually has a picture at the museum
poster
up there that you can see that little
Satellite
white dot
imagery.
in the middle of all those green trees. I mean, from space, it's just a little round circle out there. And how big was that circle? 25 miles?
50 square miles.
50 square miles.
And it was visible from orbit. The Mercury astronauts, it was one of the things they could pick out from orbit. And you were talking about the open grazing. We've got photographs from the 40s where you're looking at some of these communities and some of these company facilities, and then you're like, what's that over there on the hill? And it's cows. They would bring them up, like you said, and they would graze on the perimeter there where you still had some grass growing.
Sort of said that.
That seemed like an odd place to bring them, a place with no grass.
Yes, but I don't know. I guess you mentioned the book that Rod and Ducktown in Rod's Time.
Yeah, Ducktown Back in Rod's Time by R.E. Barkley is the best single source for that early period of the basin's history, from the discovery of copper in 43 up through the closing of the mines in 78 for lack of transportation, 1878.
Ken was telling me during the break that he's opened his last box of those, and that's it when they're gone. So if you want one, you need to get up to the museum and see Ken.
Yes, there's an individual up there that played a big part in developing all that, and he even wanted to keep some of the vegetation killed where people would know David Beckler. Do you know him?
I do know Mr. Beckler. He was one of the original founders of the museum that I work for, and they actually were successful in getting what was called the set-aside area, about 400 acres that they did not do any work on. The problem is they've been so successful around it that you're getting encroachment into that area now. It's visible from the museum overlook, but most of it now has trees on it as well.
Yes, I taught school with David. He was one of the best teachers there at the high school, and the kids all loved him. And he was a traditionalist there at the basin.
Yes,
and I enjoyed talking about that because that's I have some fond memories of the basin area, and I'm glad y'all have preserved its history.
Thank you.
They do an excellent job. If you haven't been to the museum, and if you have pictures or old films, we need them for that, for the Ducktown documentary that we're doing. We're talking about the lives, not the mining. We're going to talk more about the lives of the people.
Well, everybody's life was intertwined with the mines, but we want to talk about Mama having to get her
we're not
clothes
going
off
down
the
in the
lines
mines
and that kind of stuff.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ken, let me ask you a question there.
Yes, sir.
I've asked you this before. I'm going to ask you again.
Okay.
Is there still copper up there and still stuff to make sulfuric acid and all this other stuff?
There is. They did not run out of ore. The short answer is they stopped mining in 1987 because they could no longer produce copper at a profit. Now, there's a couple of things that are unknowns. One, the companies never tried to find total proven reserves. They were just content with a planning reserve, which for them was around 15 to 20 million tons. They were mining a little under 2 million tons a year by that time. But there was a known reserve of some 20 million tons that had already been core drilled when the mines closed in the 80s. This would be lying at a depth of around 2,500 to 3,000 foot, which is how deep they were at that point.
Half mile.
Mm-hmm. Talk to geologists, and they say there's potential for even more ore at depth because, again, they did not find the bottom of a couple of those deposits. They lay near vertical to the surface. But the same people will tell you that the odds of you and I seeing that mine are very, very slight.
Is copper use as big as it was, or have they replaced it with other elements?
No,
now?
Copper is still huge. You've got 2 billion people now in India and China that are getting electricity in the middle-class life. So the world demand is still there, but the reality is there are other places right now that can supply it cheaper or of a higher grade. Now, that's not to say they won't mine in the basin. It's just not likely you and I will see it. But the odds are they will mine there again in the future.
Some people don't want that to happen.
Well, it will not. It will not be the way it was before.
Yeah.
I mean, the odds are it'll be a guy
New
running
technology.
a robot.
Yeah. Hey, go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hello, Ron.
Hey, Miss Ella.
Hey.
What are you doing?
I was sitting around just Getting over last night.
Getting over last night. Was you drunk last night?
No.
How many beers you have last night?
One.
One. She had one bottle they filled up 5 times.
A 40-ounce beer.
The Collins brothers was there last night.
That's a good group. JoJo Collins and his brother, they're a really good band.
Yeah, they are. JoJo's a real good singer.
He sure is, yeah, one of the best. He takes after his dad, Joe.
Huh?
His dad's name is Joe, and he's a pretty good singer. He was in gospel quartets for years.
Oh, was he? I didn't
Yep.
know that.
Yep.
Guess who else was there?
Fast Eddie.
No.
I don't know then. Who? Mark. Did you dance with Mark?
No, I didn't stay late enough because I had to get home.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you just keep telling those stories that you and Mark ain't got something going. You're showing up at the same place all the time. I know what's happening.
Well, I just got a couple of hugs from them, that's all.
Just a couple.
With me, but I couldn't stay late enough because they let him sing after they get through, and I was going to stay there and listen to him sing, but I had to get home because my sister might go to sleep and I couldn't get in the gate.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, how long did each of those hugs last? 30 minutes?
No.
All right, Miss Ellie, you have a good one, all right?
All right.
Bye-bye.
Well, speaking of people that sing, they're having it tonight at the Gum Springs Baptist Church. Ray Branham and his family, and they're going to be leading songs from the Redback Hymnal. So if you're interested in that, it starts at 6 p.m.
Maybe Ray will bring his guitar and pick some.
And Mr. Brownlow over at the Roth House is looking for pictures of his house before the sunroom was added on the south side. So if you happen to have a glimpse, even a partial glimpse of his house, probably from the 1960s and back, he would love to see that so he can...
Yeah, if you don't know where the Roth House is, it's the big older house across from where the train depot used to be there at Magic Shelf, Maytag, Whirlpool, whatever it is
it's
today.
the big brick house on the hill.
And
Linden Avenue.
Original pictures, and he has a lot to do with the subject we're talking about today because Mr. Roth was very involved in the copper industry.
Yes.
In the early days.
He was the copper industry.
He was certainly the reason it made it through the period of the 19th century.
One of the richest men in Tennessee at one time.
Yes, he was. The richest man, according to Barclay's book.
Did he have a house also at Copper Hill?
He had a cabin that he stayed at when he was in the basin over the mines, but his family, for the most part, stayed in Cleveland.
Yeah. Now, this is long before the railroad would have started,
Right.
and they brought the copper down what they call the Copper Road, Parksville.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what you think it is today. It's a little different. It was a dirt road. But they brought it down, and it would he shipped the copper out of the railroads here in Cleveland in the 50s. And he also had a store there that he sold stuff to the miners to take back up to sell. I mean, he sold to the guys to take it back up and sell to the miners.
Right.
So he's making money both ways.
Well, at that time, the commissaries, what we call the company stores, they were operated under contract. So the company did not run the company store. They would put it out to contract. And within a few years of Mr. Roth's arrival in the basin to be mine foreman, which at that time was referred to as the captain, that's where he got that nickname, Captain Roth, he had obtained the commissary contracts. So he was running the stores. And then he very quickly got a lot of the interest in the freight companies that were hauling the copper down and the goods back, and then took that money and began to buy farms in western Polk and eastern Bradley County that were providing the goods that were being sold. So we talk about vertical integration. He was ahead of the game.
Making a dollar both ways.
Both ways.
All right.
Three ways, it sounds
so,
like.
but that house is still here. It's early 1830s, maybe.
Yes.
And if you have a picture of it before the white portion was put on the back of it, the vinyl portion, if you drive by there.
From the 1970s.
It is one of the oldest houses in Bradley County. Charleston
Definitely.
may have a few older ones. Is it pretty close?
Bob Irwin's house would be
Yeah,
it, but not a brick house.
Yeah, Bob Irwin's is 1820s. That's what they think. So That's a pretty old house. You can call us here at 614-5553. We're talking to Ken Rush from the Ducktown Basin Museum. Tell us where the museum is again so everybody knows.
We're located just off of Highway 68 in Ducktown, Tennessee. And right now, January, February, March, we're open Tuesday through Saturday from 9:30 a.m. till 4 p.m. And then when we get to April, we're Monday through Saturday.
Now, what about the Hoist House? You have events there from time to time.
We have events for the museum in the Hoist House. We use that for fundraisers and different museum activities.
You have Miners' Days. When's that?
That'll be around the 4th of July. The city of Ducktown just recently set the dates, and this year it will actually be the last weekend in June.
Last weekend in June. Mm-hmm. All right. Another good thing to see there. And you have a miners reunion at that time?
We have an employees reunion. It's open for anyone, not just the miners, because we talk a lot about mining, but the reality is you had many more people working on the surface than worked underground. So the company reunion is open to any past employee of the company for any length of time at any time period.
Like I say, in our documentary we were working on, we need videos, 8mm film, color black and white pictures. We want to show life, your normal life, having a birthday party with the Red Hills behind you, playing softball, Red Hills behind you, washing your car with the Red Hills behind you. We just want to show that life went on as it was, and that's the main theme of that. Go ahead, call. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Ron, I got one quick question for him.
Go ahead.
It's Mr. Mitchell. And are there any of the Mitchells left that was over the Tennessee Copper Company that lived down there and going like you're going to Ducktown?
Right. I know who you're referring to. Mr. T.A. Mitchell was longtime general manager of the operations there. His daughter was still living in the basin. She passed away just under 2 years ago. And I know that he has some nieces that live, I believe, in the Nashville area, and then perhaps some others living in New York State. But there are no surviving members of the Mitchell family now living in the basin.
I tell you, he was a great person.
Mm-hmm.
Great old man.
You hear many kind words about Mr. Mitchell.
He was a friend of my father-in-law, and my father-in-law would go down there. They would send the painters down there to repaint the wood and stuff on Mr. Mitchell's house.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he treated them like royalty. You know, he didn't treat them like employees. And I had a chance to meet him. But I'll get off here. That's what I wanted to know. His daughter was still alive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Going back to the mining strike, miners' strike, I guess, you told me that the national leaders of the unions actually came down to here. Is that true?
Yes. During that time, you had high-ranking officials, both with the CIO and with the AFL, that were in the basin helping to organize the relief efforts. They were bringing in monies to, provide food and groceries for the families that were no longer getting paid, and also to try to organize their parties and subvert the others. Again, it truly was a three-legged fight.
So as you said, the unions were actually fighting against each other.
Correct.
Now we know those two unions now to be one big union
right.
together.
They, CIO splintered out of AFL, and then I'm not sure of the year, but at some point later they rejoined.
Do you have, has any of the guys or families told you any really interesting stories that happened during the strikes that just comes to mind real quick?
Well, a lot of instances of, people talking about, being unable to go back to work if they had not crossed the line by that date. There were other families that, again, there's, I guess, old blood, bad blood. There's still some remembrances by children and grandchildren now of different families where they were on opposite lines. Another thing that went on during that time is there were actually some dynamiting of TVA's power lines that were coming in to supply the electricity for the facilities, and you ended up with
federal there.
Right, you ended up with some individuals being tried on federal. It's domestic terrorism, federal terrorism charges. Went through the federal appeals system. they were convicted, later overturned because of the fact that they were basically coerced into their confessions, and it's sort of a big convoluted story in of itself.
That's
but
before Miranda rights.
very much so.
Oh, yeah.
There was even the community had parades of support, didn't they?
Right. That same video shows. I talked a little bit about the Guards show of force, but they were workers and families counter parades that were sort of their way of supporting the men and what was going on. And you see women and children and young kids out on the street marching in support of the men and of the strike. And then there were, rallies. You had speakers coming in, rallying for the opposite sides. So it was, again, today you would think none of that could have gone on in this sleepy little place, but it was actually a hotbed of activity during that time.
So did the miners who are on strike, do they have signs in their yards? And
I don't. Well, the little bit of video footage we have is more shot in town. You do see them in town around the pickets and around the entrances to the plants. The image you had up earlier, that was along the main highway. 68 used to run through the middle of Ducktown, and that was along Highway 68.
Now, the picture I have up now is I've got two different pictures of those three guys out by the Ducktown Hotel. Now, tell us where that was.
That is right on Main Street in Ducktown, unfortunately no longer standing. And that road that you see going off in the distance behind them would be a entrance into the plant, into the Burra Burra site. So that would be an entrance into the Burra Burra property.
Now, do you know who those three guys are?
I know the one in the middle, in the overalls, was a gentleman nicknamed Flathead Good.
Flathead Good.
Everybody had a nickname.
Mm-hmm.
If you worked in the mines, you had a nickname. Tell me about Glen Springs Holding. What is that?
Okay. The mines closed in 1987. At that time, the owners of the company were Tennessee Chemical Company. They had purchased it from City Service in 1982, and they continued making sulfuric acid, buying sulfur, and shipping it in. Within a couple of years, Tennessee Chemical went into bankruptcy, and while they were individuals interested in buying the chemical plant because it was still making a product, no one wanted to buy the old Isabella complex, which had been abandoned, and any of these old mine sites that were no longer in production. So the bankruptcy court actually carved the facility at Copper Hill out of the holdings and put it out for sale. And then what the state and EPA does is they look for parties they can hold responsible for cleaning up these other properties. And the company prior to Tennessee Chemical was City Service Company. They had been purchased by Occidental Petroleum after the sale, so Occidental never owned the mines in the basin, but when you buy a company, you buy their legacy. So EPA and the state began negotiating with Occidental in the 90s about remediating the basin, and they reached a negotiated agreement and avoided going to court. That was signed in 2000, actually 2001. And they began to work on the cleanup. Now, Glen Springs Holdings is a subsidiary of Occidental Petroleum. So Glen Springs Holdings is a internal company within Occidental that they use to remediate mine properties.
How much did they spend?
They have spent to date $138 million, and that number I got several months ago, so I'm sure it is more than that now.
So is there still areas that hadn't got fully recovered? Is Potato Creek back to where original 1800 level?
It is, as we can tell. The main part of the agreement that Occidental signed with EPA and the state is that they would make any physical hazard safe, which is fencing mine collapses, demolishing buildings that needed to come down. They would clean up any human hazards identified, which, to date have been primarily PCBs from where you've had transformers and electrical equipment, not particular to mining, just any time. Mm-hmm. And the old acid plant at Isabella was constructed of lead, so you had lead in the soil that they had to remediate. But the big part of their agreement was that they would bring the creeks into compliance, and they would treat the flow of the creeks prior to them emptying into the Ocoee until they reached that compliance. And what they've done is they've looked at the creeks coming off the mountains above the mining district. And when they can make the bottom portion of the creek look like the top portion, then that's considered normal or natural. Last year, North Potato Creek was considered incompliant. It was flowing as it would be naturally as near as we can tell. And so it now free flows to the Ocoee, no longer needing treating. Davis Mill Creek, the lower portion of it, they will have to treat in perpetuity.
Okay. Go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Okay, this T Bandy.
Go ahead, T Bandy.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the Cowboy Church this morning.
Go ahead.
They had Heartstrings was down there last night, and the place was full. And Miles Howard's going to be down there next Friday night. Miles Howard and his family. And Steve Poteet, I think, been trying to call us.
Yeah, I had him and then I lost him, and I've been waiting for him to call back.
Yeah, they're the Spirit Horse over at Black Fox is they're trying to get hay for the horses, and they're $4 a bale donation to the Spirit Song. Okay. Or Spirit Horse.
Okay.
And he'll probably call you. He was probably busy after I heard him call in. But Miles Howard's going to be playing. We're going out to the Gum Springs and to listen to Sammy Shelton play the piano tonight.
All right.
Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
So now what's wrong with the other creek?
The lower portion of Davis Mill, I guess if we say money is no object, and you can, it could be brought into compliance or cleaned up. That's the fancy word for clean, compliance. But the decision has been made that rather than do that, they've diverted all the water upstream around it because it is clean and now flows through a pipe straight to the river. And the bottom portion, the best answer for the future is just that they will catch and treat it. So they've built a dam that allows them to catch that flow before it gets to the Ocoee, and they can pump that water back through a treatment plant.
And what is in that?
It's primarily, we're talking about metals. So you're talking about iron, and you're talking about copper, and you're talking about extremely low pH as far as not eat your skin off your hand acidic, but too harmful or too low to be allowed to flow into a creek.
Right. Basically, that was many. If you remember, Parksville used to be crystal blue clear, which means there was nothing growing in there.
Nothing.
And that was because of all this water that came through.
Well, copper's an algicide, so it kills the algae.
It did a good job.
Let's get this.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yeah, I've kind of got a question about this too, Ron, and then I want to say something about Wally Barnell over there about his wife. They don't expect her to live that much longer at Cowboy Church. I'm going to tell you that in just a minute. Anyway, the way I understand it, now tell me if I'm wrong. The guy can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm not for sure, but the stuff that comes from the copper mines did not kill the fish. It killed the microscopic life that the baby fish eat.
That is correct. Yeah, the copper in particular, but some of the other metals as well. It's my understanding, and you're talking to a historian now, not a biologist, but it killed the algae and the tiny things that live in the water that the bigger critters need to eat. So it didn't kill them per se, it just starved them out.
As soon as they become the free swimming stage, a free swimming stage, in other words, I've raised angelfish in an aquarium before, but anyway, when they come free swimming stage, there was no microscopic stuff, or what I guess you'd call it microscopic, age, so the fish started getting thin. But now, I have heard that Parksville Lake has got the less mercury and the cleanest fish. In other words, that a body could catch.
I don't know if it's the cleanest fish, but I know it has much improved, and I don't believe there's a current restriction, at least a low restriction. I think I don't think there's any stream or river in the state or the country that doesn't have some restrictions as to the number of pounds they recommend you eat. But it is much improved in the last 20 years.
It was the lowest one in the for less mercury than it was the most. It was rated the most cleanest, down by what is the agriculture service, whatever that is, up there on the left going into Parksville, the ranger station, and then all the pamphlet stuff. It was rated the fish was cleaner there than.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm talking about. Oh yeah, and that guy called in back to Cowboy Church. Well, Linda went last night, Ron, David, and I was going to go. I've been tied up, but I used to play over there. I played over there for, I don't know, maybe 2 years with Elmer and the Cowboy Church man. But Wally, I know Wally Varnell, real good, the one that's kind of, I guess, the owner. I don't know. He was the main preacher over there. His wife is in intensive care right now. Everybody pray for her. And they've called the family in. And I don't know if it's Sky Ridge or what, but I know she's having a real rough time right now. And everybody pray for her. And anyway.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to get off.
Okay. Thank you for calling, Sid.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I wanted to ask somebody here online who has a question about, do you know if the sulfuric acid was used at Oak Ridge during the war?
I'm not aware of it going to Oak Ridge, but it did go to Tyner, to Volunteer Ammunition, to make explosives. Now, again, it may have been, but I do know we shipped a lot of oleum to Tyner because that is used in making TNT.
Did you have a lot of different, in the earlier years of the mines, were there lots of different cultures there, or were it primarily a white community?
Well, it was certainly primarily a white community, but I guess the different mix that you find from most of these mountain regions, we talk about the Scotch-Irish, that's what's all through these mountains. And in the basin, that was probably the majority nationalities. But because of the mines, you had other nationalities coming in because they had particular skills that were needed. So you had a lot of Welsh that came into the basin in the 1850s and 60s because the Cornish, the Welsh, were considered the best miners in the world. So if you had a mining company, you hired a Welsh or Cornishman to run your mines. And then you had individuals like Captain Rod, who was from Germany. And again, he came out of the mining districts of Germany to work. So
I believe his wife never spoke English. She only spoke German.
I think that is correct.
I know that one of my great whatever aunts was listed as a Dago cook. What in the world was that?
Well, I'm pretty sure Dago is a slur.
That's why I was asking about the cultures.
For Italians.
Okay.
And they were what were known in, I guess, polite circles as foreign camps. You had a lot of immigrant labor that came to the basin in our second period when the mines reopened in 1890. In 1890, you had a lot of immigrant because at that time a lot of the work was still physical. There was not mechanized yet. So you're running a shovel and you're running a wheelbarrow, and so they were foreign camps that were set up around all three communities that these workers came in to live in, and they provided what we would call unskilled labor today. We had a cultural geographer look at some of that several years ago, and while there were several Italians there, he found many other nationalities as well, basically all along the eastern Mediterranean. So you had Cypriots, you had Greeks, you had Serbs, you had Slavs. So they were not all Italian, but they were primarily coming from that region of Europe.
That was interesting how they had that listed.
Did they segregate themselves automatically?
Well, I'm not sure they had a choice about where they resided. They put them in those camps.
But now would the Italians and the Germans be in the same camp, or would they be segregated?
No. They were only one camp. So those would have been all together. And the camps persisted through the First World War. They were broken up as far as the housing during the influenza epidemic, and at that time because of sanitary reasons of proximity, they moved them out into other company housing. But by the 20s, as they began to mechanize, a lot of those jobs left. So those individuals probably moved on to other parts of the country.
Was there blacks in the community?
No, you did not see that, other than some working as what we would call a servant or an orderly.
Wow.
Go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Oh, this Bob Cash.
Hey, Bob Cash, how are you?
What's up, buddy?
I'm enjoying your program this morning. That fellow there, he has got a lot of knowledge, and he's good to listen to. And I was just wondering, Red, did she ever dig that copper in the mines in there?
No, she
got some tubing to go with her steel there.
Yeah, she used some copper tubing.
Oh, okay. I'll see what you're saying. Well, listen, you guys have a great day. Just wanted to
Well, and I know that copper tubing just brings a tear to your eyes, doesn't it?
Oh, it certainly does. Yeah. But, in fact, I'm getting a little thirsty right now. Hey, I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye-bye. She may still have a gallon of that underneath the bed there.
One of the best stories coming out of Copper Hill is the development of the hospital. Can you talk to about that for just a little bit?
The Tennessee Copper Company did have a medical department. In fact, one of the buildings on site at Burra Burra was originally constructed to be a clinic for the company doctor, or one of the company doctors.
Now, you're refurbishing that now.
Yes, that was one of the buildings that was fully restored as our most recent capital project. We got some what they term capital project money from the state of Tennessee. Was able to get that building restored to as it would have looked in the 1920s. But Tennessee Copper also constructed a hospital on the property there at Copper Hill, on what we term Smelter Hill, where a lot of the management homes were. And again, if you worked for the company, you had medical care provided through the company doctor and the company hospital. So there are multiple generations of children that were born in Tennessee Copper Company Hospital. And for a long time, Dr. Strauss headed up the medical department there, and he's still quite revered in the basin for all the years of service he put in at Tennessee Copper Hospital. But there were other doctors as well, and I'm leaving names out.
Basically, people paid a little bit out of their paycheck every month.
Right.
Or every week just a small amount, but times 2,500 people.
Right.
They paid for their own hospital.
Right.
It was their hospital.
It was their hospital.
I've got a sign up if you're on the internet. It says, "Hey, John T." What does it say there?
No, that says, "Hey, don't
I
scab."
believe they've lost some lettering. It says, "Men don't scab. Be loyal to your home and community."
Yeah.
See, I think that was fun. Your home and your community, because the mines were your community, and if the mines weren't there, you didn't need the miners, and of course the mines needed the miners, and back and forth. So we talked about it started July. When did it actually end? And
they started production back in September 28th of 39. That was that period I said where if you didn't come back to work, they were hiring.
Now this wasn't with all the miners.
No, it was not with all.
It was
the miners.
with scabs.
You had a lot of scabs
or people who wanted to go to work.
Right, but you had a lot of people that crossed or went back as well.
Yeah.
But it was not until spring of 1940 that they signed a new contractual agreement. So the strike officially ended in spring of 1940, but the work stoppage ended in September 28th of 39. You see that quite often today. Workers
75 days or something like that.
6 weeks for actually being out on strike. Okay. That is 8 weeks.
Yeah. 10
weeks. I can't count today.
Now you said the guys who did not go back, the guys who held out to that new contract signed out. Did any of them go back, or were they done?
Some did. There were a few positions where the skills were such that they wanted them back, but there were several men that were just never hired back, and it was made, probably not above the table, but under the table, clear to them that, you're not getting a job back a lot. And the other thing you notice when you look at a lot of the company records is you see tons of men who have the same anniversary date. And you're like, wow, they hired a lot of people on that day. Well, it's after this date, it's everyone who came back to work after that.
In the mines, there was a great discrepancy in what you got paid from talking to the people that I've talked to up there. And one lady was telling me in the early 1960s, I believe it was her brother-in-law was a driller, and they got paid per foot.
Yes, most of the jobs underground were what we call straight rate jobs. You were paid initially so much a day and then later so much an hour as that became the norm for payroll. But drilling almost always stayed under a contract basis. So you had a base pay but then you had a bonus or an incentive that you were paid by the foot, and a good driller could make a lot of money.
She was saying, making $14,000 in 1961
Right.
was big time money.
good money.
It's big money.
She said, her dad and her husband, made a standard rate for what they did.
That's
but
above minimum wage now.
Yeah.
And again, the reason for that is, it all starts with the drilling, because, the whole goal underground is to break and move the rock you're trying to get out, but not fracture the rock you're leaving, because that's now your support. So a good driller not only could drill, a lot of feet in a day, but it has to be drilled correctly. Because if it doesn't break correctly, you've got to come back and re-drill it. And if you get fracturing in areas you didn't want fractured, then that's a big problem too, where you've got to come back and do extra bracing or shoring. So it was to the company's advantage to offer that incentive, that bonus pay, because at the end of the day, there's a couple of questions the bosses are asking in the mines. It's how many tons of ore did we break, and how many tons of ore did we get to the surface?
This was hard rock mining.
Hard rock mining.
It's a lot different than coal mining.
Very
right?
different. Very different.
So to get down there and to drill these holes, it was a lot harder to drill the tunnels
right.
than it would be in a coal mine.
Right. Because it's hard rock, you have to drill holes and load explosives in them and then blast or shoot the rock down, and then you have to go in and clean that out, and the driller set back up. So a drift or a tunnel was typically advanced 10-foot in 10-foot headings. So they would drill a series of holes 10 foot deep. That would be loaded and shot out. Then you clean that out, and then they'd set back up and drill another 10 foot.
Now, there is some bracing they do just to make everybody feel better.
Well, there were some areas that bracing was needed, but for the most part in the basin it was not required.
Okay. So now, how many miles of tunnels are underneath?
Hundreds of miles.
And
now you think, oh wow, that's 100-mile long tunnel. No, because it's like a tall building. They're like floors in a building.
Yeah.
The Burra Burra mine, for instance, it goes down to a depth of 2,400 foot. So you have roughly 24 levels. Each level is 100 foot, and the ore body itself is probably a little over maybe 3,000 foot on strike on length. But there's over 50 miles of tunneling, but it's like a ant farm. There's like just tunnels upon tunnels. So, but, just to make everybody feel comfortable, and I know people don't believe this, we go through this every time I'm on your show, the mines are not under the towns. The Copper Hill and Ducktown are not going to fall in the mines one day.
We hope not.
They're between the two towns, and because they're accurately mapped, we know where the mines are. So the areas that are at risk of collapsing have now been fenced off. So as long as you don't cross a fence, you're not on dangerous ground.
Has anybody went down and done a video of walking through the mines?
Well, now there was some video shot in the 70s.
I was going to volunteer my son to go down and do that.
Well, they're all full of water today, Ron.
Oh, okay.
So there would be no access.
Well, he can swim good.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is a problem. Let's get this call. Hey, go ahead, caller. You're live.
Hey, speaking of hard rock, how about some disco music a little later on? Doc Hollywood's Dynamite Dance Show.
The Dynamite, are you going to have any girls dancers?
Yeah, I got my Belgian blonde bombshell with me here. Oh,
Belgium blonde bombshell. Say that 3 times real fast.
I couldn't get it right on the first one there.
What time?
But, 6 to 8 p.m., break away from the everyday, get a lot of stuff there at Whoop Country Bluegrass and the award-winning Old Town Cleveland show there. But Doc Hollywood's Dynamite Dance Show has never won an award, but who knows? Maybe today's the day.
But you won the hearts and the minds of thousands. I tell you, at 5:58 we're playing Flat and Scruggs, and then at 6 o'clock we're playing the Average White Band, little funk.
Staying alive. We'll get that on for you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Doc.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I love in the museum the helmets and the rack where you hang the clothes. How much does it cost to get in the museum?
The entrance to the museum is $5 for adults, $4 for senior citizens. Children between the ages of 13 and 18, it's $2. Ages 7 to 12, it's $1, and under that is free. We have about an 11-minute video that we start you with that gives you a nice background of the basis history. Well, he was already on salary. So. And then our exhibits and displays, generally most people take another 30 to 45 minutes. So, the tagline we've been using for the last several years is you can get 150 years worth of history in about an hour.
Mm-hmm. And your folks that work there are very helpful, and you have a nice little, I'll call it the company store. You've got a nice little bookstore there that's got and some jewelry and stuff that I look at with great interest every time I go in.
We try to carry area and local books as well as different jewelry items. We're always looking for locally made stuff. Some of what we have but some of what we have we buy wholesale as well.
What other ores were sold from the mines up there? I mean, we know copper, we know sulfur. You've got the stuff for the steel now.
Right.
What else?
By the 1920s, when they went to a milling program that allowed them to crush the ore and separate the minerals prior to it going to the furnaces, they began to recover the copper, the iron, the zinc, and the sulfur. So out of the ore, they're recovering those 4 elements. They roughly, out of a ton of ore, and this is an average and it would vary over time, but roughly out of a ton, they got around 20 pounds of copper. So it was about 2% copper, although by the time they closed in the 80s, it was down to 1%. They got about 0.75% of zinc. It was about 25% sulfur, and it was in the 30% iron. So they were recovering some 1,200 pounds of material out of that 2,000 pounds of ore. Now, that doesn't mean all of that made money. Some of that, the cost of separating it was what it was worth.
What about the zinc? What was that used for?
Well, the zinc was high grade, but there was not enough to pay to build a refining furnace locally, so they shipped the concentrate to zinc mines further west. You had zinc mining around Clarksville, Tennessee, and then in southeast Missouri. But zinc is an important alloy in a lot of our metals we use. But we think about zinc plated nails. It prevents corrosion. It's used in tin roofs. But I also believe zinc is an element in producing hardened steel. But again, you're talking to a historian here, not a
I think here in Cleveland we had some surface type mining a little bit, or type of magnesium down the Dalton Pike area, and.
People that still own
silicon or what?
They still own the mineral rights. The people that sold the farms years ago still own the mineral rights. Everybody who bought the farms got everything on top of the ground. I find that very interesting.
Yep.
I thought I was seeing all kinds of Indian mounds and stuff too, and come to find out it's where people have been digging for the
manganese.
And one side of the road's chalky white, and one side's got the big red rocks.
Something on and around Black Fox. It's psyllium.
Yes.
Is that what is that the right one? There's some psyllium mining went down in that area. So, but no copper here. So, what created copper? I mean, are you a true geologist? Yeah, I know you're a historian. But,
no, I am not.
So, but
that is a rock.
We know. There. You go to. I watch Gold Rush on Discovery Channel, and they move tons and tons of dirt to get 2 or 3 ounces of gold. So you're a little bit ahead of that, but a ton of material and you got 20 pounds of copper. That was a lot of work.
It was, and without the sulfur, had they not developed the technology to recover the sulfur, the odds are very great that the mines would have closed after the First World War. Probably would have reopened during the Second World War and then closed again. Because the reality is, in the 20th century, they made the money on making sulfuric acid and producing chemical products from the sulfuric acid. As much as we talk about copper, it really was secondary to the sulfur in the 20th century.
Well, it was the copper originally.
Right. Well, that's the limits of the technology.
And the smelting was what really killed all the plants, and because they cut down the trees to burn the copper, and roast it.
And at that time,
and it released sulfur acid and it killed everything else.
And at that time, they couldn't recover the SO2.
They didn't even know what it was, did they?
Oh, they did. We have documents from the 1860s
where
they're talking about the loss of revenue and the potential to make sulfuric acid, but they did not have the technology yet.
Let me take Ken way back here.
Okay.
Before Ducktown, it was called Hiwassee Town.
Correct.
Do we have evaluations from the removal of the people who lived there, what their properties were worth? Have you ever seen those?
I have. I can't quote those numbers off the top of my head, but there were what we would call surveys done prior to removal where they would inventory their farms and their holdings. I have saw those documents that were done in the 1830s when they were getting ready for removal. There were several large Cherokee settlements in that region prior to removal.
Did the Cherokees own slaves, do you recall?
I don't know of any in the basin,
Okay.
and I think, and this is an assumption here, I may be wrong. Most of the time the owning of slaves went with large-scale agriculture, and the geography of the basin did not allow large-scale agriculture.
That sounds correct. So Ducktown, Turtletown, where did those names come from?
They're both translations for Cherokee words. There was a village between what is now Copper Hill and Ducktown that was called Kawane or Kawana, and that roughly translates to place of the duck.
Okay.
And there was one up near present-day Turtletown that, again, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but it was Shalowa or Shalawa, which, again, roughly translates to place of the turtle. And so in those early censuses, it would say Kawane and then underneath Ducktown.
Oh, that's good to know because I've seen that Kawane on stuff and didn't have a clue where it was. Potato Creek?
It's always been there from nearest I can tell. I suspect that was a Cherokee name as well. Tennessee was Tanasi.
Tanasi.
Right.
And it was a Cherokee.
Ocoee was Occoquan.
Yeah, I agree. And Tequoka.
So, was there any cranberries this year?
I heard there were. Yeah.
And wait a minute, explain what you're talking about. Go, kid.
There's a cranberry bog.
There are a couple of cranberry bogs in the basin in and around Ducktown. They are not the true bogs like we see in New England, but they are cranberries that live in the wild along a couple of creeks. They like acidic soil. So where the acid probably killed out a lot of other things, the cranberries did okay. Most of the land that has the cranberries on it now is in Tennessee Wildlife hands, and they have a protected area, have a little, I guess you'd call it preserve, where they have some land set aside.
So I can't get any cranberries?
I don't think we can go in there and harvest, no.
Okay. Would we want to?
I've ate them before out of the one on the school property land.
Yeah.
They're tasty if you like a cranberry.
Well, that's good.
Ken, I cannot believe 2 hours has whizzed by.
Once again.
And I still have a bunch of questions over here.
Tell us about the museum one more time. Where and what time, when, who?
Okay, we are located in Ducktown, just off of Tennessee Highway 68. The museum is open right now, Tuesday through Saturday, from 9:30 a.m. till 4 p.m. Beginning in April, we will be Monday through Saturday, and our hours will shift from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m.
I found out the hard way when I was there.
4:30.
They're filming in the lower buildings. People who aren't familiar will come and they park first at the lower buildings. Right. When you pull in the drive, you'll see a big brown sign.
Right, and we should be getting new signage in the next couple of months.
And you drive all the way to the top of the hill to go to the museum. Right. And
in that new signage will include some intermediate signs to direct you up the hill. We're actually, the state of Tennessee Historical Commission is having new signs fabricated right now to be installed.
And at the top of the up at the top up there where the museum is, if you over to the left of it, there's a big hole out there. Tell us what that is real quick.
We have an overlook in our parking lot that looks down into a collapse or a cave-in into part of the works at Burra Burra. It caved to the surface in 1925. They were expecting it to cave. No one was injured. No one was under it at that point. And since we've stopped mining, they've stopped pumping the water. When you go 2,000 and 3,000 foot deep, you hit water. So now the mines are all flooded. So when you look off the overlook, you'll see this nice blue-green water in that collapse, and that's where that water's picking up copper.
How big is that hole?
It's probably a couple of 100 foot across and maybe 100 foot vertical down to the water line.
Size of a football field?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how far is it from the top up there where you're standing, the overlook? Because I've never been able to throw a rock and hit the water.
It is a lot further than you
Well, I realized that because I said, well, I can throw a rock.
That illusion of height changes your perception of distance.
It is a lot farther away.
I have estimated, just looking at an aerial photograph, that it's every bit of 500 foot, if not further.
So it's a tenth of a mile.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't throw that far.
No.
Maybe Peyton could come up here. We get Peyton Manning there. You think he could
maybe
throw football?
In his youth. I'm not so sure any longer. I'm afraid Mr. Peyton's father time's caught
football
up with
cannons
him.
Is what we need. Yeah. All right. Well, and folks, if you go up there, make sure you mentioned you heard it here at Old Town Cleveland, and the price will not go up. I assure you.
No, it will not.
Just let them know where they hear about that stuff, and I do encourage you to go up. It's a great time of the year to go up. When the leaves are down off off the many trees now. Although there's a lot of pines there, you can see a whole lot more. I've seen things up there I'd never noticed before, particularly that little bridge that goes over on Main Street. I got a picture of Main Street up here.
Right. Oh, yeah.
That's early Main Street.
One of my favorite stories to come out of the softball field there, someone was telling me that their great uncle had been the umpire there for many years, and he had to carry a .38 under his chest protector just in case the crowd got out of hand.
Well, passionate about sports, nothing new.
Thank you so much, Ken, and we'll let everybody know when the documentary's finished, and we will
we
be
do
premiering that.
We need stories, we need pictures, black and white color pictures. We need 8mm film, particularly, or if you have video. Some people may have actually a VHS tape of still the old dirt looking hills, the red hills. We want to see some of that just to show the younger people that get to see this. Will, unless they see it in picture, are never going to get that. And there's home videos that people hadn't seen. Ken hadn't seen. You'd like to have stories.
We know they're out there.
Yeah. We just need them there. Folks, you've got to save history. It's your part. You've got to go and talk to your grandmothers and your grandfathers, your mom, your dad, your aunts, your uncles, your neighbors. Take a pad and paper, write it down, or take a pocket recorder. Take your cell phone. You can do almost anything with your cell phone. Makes great video and saves this. Get those old pictures from out of the drawers and out of the shoe boxes and take them somewhere and get them scanned and share them with people, because you'll never know what that old picture, what memory it brings back to your neighbors, to your friends, people who shopped with your mom, dad, worked with them. You've got to save a history, and I'm afraid with the new technical era, we won't have physical pictures anymore. There is no people actually printing pictures.
I had some printed this week for the first time in a year.
So you've got to do that. And Deb, we'll always remember about Pearl Harbor.
But will we remember Aunt Pearl?
Oh, ain't that corny, but we love to say it. Hey, we'll see you next week
Y'all laugh
here
every
on
time.
Old Town Cleveland.
And I feel so insecure about leaving my bike out there, thanks to the kleptomaniac who's got me very scared of to leave my own merchandise in the yard.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into Checking to Cash.
The cash you need is closer than you think.
Get an auto title loan today for up to $2,500 at Check Into Cash.
You drive home with the cash in your pocket.
Visit Check Into Cash for an auto